section, we're going to be expanding on everything that we've learned in the previous videos, and we're going to take it to the next level. I think we're going to do a fun little project where we're going to revisit retro graphics from the past. And since we're just doing very simple stuff with cubes and materials, we're going to recreate the look of creating sprites, and we're going to be using cubes to be able to do that. So you can see on this one, if I hide this part here, these different blocks, and I hide maybe this, you can see we started off with an image and it's just mapped to a plane. If we take a look at the wireframe, what I try to do is make a very simple plane, and each one of these 1 meter divisions on the plane would equal out to be like a pixel. And so then we can take this sprite that I was able to find and then recreate that and color pick and everything else like that from that, and build a background section for that as well. So you can see here's the final look of this, and then when we get done, we'll be able to actually run around on this as if it's like a little level. And so again, we're just using the blocks that we've built and we're using them as sprites like this. Okay, and then I've got another project that we can take a look at, and after we create this one and we create a material library for this, let's take a look down here. We'll build a material library for this and we'll be able to expand on that for the next project that we're going to be using this technique with. So for the second project, we will expand on this. We'll be doing basically pixel art, but instead of just doing 2D pixel art, which would be from the top down, we'll expand on that a little bit, and then we'll actually add dimensionality to this. Now we're able to get a very cool look through this using Unreal Engine 5 and using their lumen system, and this gives us global illumination. So if we make some materials that have emissive values to it, and emissive just simulates like there's light coming out of this, and so I've got some emissive on this blue material, this and this yellow material. That's all we need to simulate some light. Now I do have a rectangular light on top of there, so we'll cover just a little bit about lighting, which is not going to be that in depth, but we will be able to set up a lighting scenario for this. The other thing that I'm going to show you is on this one, instead of placing individual blocks, we can do that, but then we can also turn the placement of this thing in the world into a blueprint. And if we take a look at a blueprint, we can actually do scripting with this, but if we go to the viewport of this, you can just see I stole all the pieces that was laid out in the world and then created basically this becomes like a container. Now this just has geometry that was used in the world, and we can move that around, and then once you basically get a copy of this, you can see like if I were to take these two blocks here and I was able to move them up, you can see that it updates live in the world, and it's actually happening on the different pieces that we've got here. So if I go to unlit, you can probably see one of the other pieces there and there. You can see how those are being lifted up at the same time. So a blueprint becomes a very powerful system, and if you did something with a blueprint, like let's say we added a light to this, so you can add all kinds of different stuff, geometry, you could add particle systems, you could add lighting information, so it becomes kind of like a really cool container. And if I just let's just put a point light in here, and if I raise this up like this, you can see that now that point light is being put on each one of these tiles that we have here. And if I change the color of the light, let's just go blue with that, like this, and hit OK, and you can see now we've got a blue light that's in the world. And so we'll look at how we can build something in the world like a tile like this, and then you can turn that into a blueprint. And then we'll also take a look at how we could build something like this ship in the world out of blocks, and then we can turn that into a blueprint as well. And on this one, I will show you a little bit about how this is the event graph, so we can start to do a little bit of visual scripting language and So it's visual programming. This is a timeline, so this just does a very simple float that starts, and it's got like 10 seconds to it, and it just goes from a value of 0 to 1 back down to 0. So it just keeps cycling through that with looping on there. And from there, that timeline just gets fed into this alpha. So I'm going to show you a little bit about a LERP, linear interpolation node. So it gives you two different values. So we're setting an up value and a down value, and then we're telling it to move this ship. The other thing that they've got in here that makes it really easy, there's a rotating movement node that you can put on here. And whenever you play all this together, I'll just put this and I'll tell it to simulate. And we'll go ahead and simulate that. And you can see what it's going to do is give the up and down motion, and then it's going to also put this rotation on there. So I think it can be a nice way to just show off your work and get something to where maybe you start to get the understanding of maybe some of the power behind visual scripting language or the blueprint system. And it makes it maybe a little bit less scary for you as an artist to know that you can make some significant changes, and you can do that pretty easily. And with just a little bit of knowledge and kind of knowing what some of these nodes do, you can start to make things happen on screen, and you can start to make animation, and you can start to make logic. And if you learn the system, I think it makes you a pretty powerful artist at that point. It makes it to where you're not just an asset creator, but you're somebody that can make gameplay elements, and you can make animation. There's just a lot of possibilities for you. So I know it's a very simple thing, but it's just at least to get your feet wet and make you feel a little bit more comfortable in this situation. Okay, so we're going to take a look at all these different things. So let's go ahead and get started. So even though this is a very simple project, we will cover quite a bit of ground in this project. So we will be in Photoshop for a little bit, and we'll talk about how we can create a 2D texture in Photoshop and set the correct resolution for that. It'll be pretty darn small because we're doing these really small sprites. We'll look at how we can take that texture that we made from Photoshop and we can import that into UE5. We'll talk a little bit about the PNG file format. We'll talk a little bit about alpha and how that can be used for transparency. When we get into the engine, we'll have an understanding of how bitmaps work on a texture. We'll also talk about texture compression and maybe the color changes that might happen whenever you compress the image. We'll take a look at how we can make it to where it's not compressing the image for the example that we're trying to create. We'll go ahead and create a sprite card. This reference geo, we can make that inside of Maya, and then we'll import that into Unreal. And basically we're setting up a piece of geometry where each polygon that we have represents a sprite, and then that sprite or that block will represent a 1 meter by 1 meter cube that we've already made with our rounded corners. Then we will talk about how we can set up materials inside of Unreal, and we'll make a parent material, and then from there we'll make material instances, and the instances will follow everything that the parents do. So it's a very powerful system, and we'll briefly look at that. We'll also take a look at a very quick lighting setup and how we can set up a rectangular light within the scene to light this scene that we have here. And then at the end, we can jump in and we can play and run over these tiles that we have, and it'll feel like a little mini environment that we're running around on top of these sprites. But I'll show you how we can swap in and out the male and the female pawns whenever we're playing inside of the game. Okay, so these are the different topics that we'll be covering. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is take a sprite sheet and we're going to turn it into this 3D sprite version, and we're going to use our blocks and our cubes to do that. So let's see what we need to get started with this. And for that, I'm going to hop on over to Photoshop and then take a look at what we can create for that inside of Photoshop. And so you can see I'm very zoomed into this image. It's actually only 32 pixels by 32 pixels. And I actually found this on the web, and I think you could probably find your own sprite images that you want to use for this project and figure that out. Actually, what I want to show here is if I zoom in really close, if I hold on Control Alt and then plus or minus, if I zoom in close enough to this, it'll actually show you the individual pixels, and it'll show you the breakdown of those pixels. So when we go into Unreal, I was actually using, you can see one of these squares, which is actually 4 pixels, will equal a 1 meter cube. Now, what could have been done for that is I could go to image size and I could actually make this 16 pixels by 16 pixels. And if I did a resample nearest neighbor, let's see what that looks like when we scale that thing down like that. And so you can see here we've got 16 pixels by 16 pixels, and at that point when we're zoomed in really close, you can see that each one of our cubes, or 1 meter cubes, will equal out to be one of these pixels. So if you wanted a higher res image, you could do that. But at the very least, I think this 16 pixel by 16 pixel thing will be, it's going to be quite a few pieces of geometry that you're going to have to make for that. So I'll leave that up to you. But to get that from the web, you can just copy something from like a web browser, find the image, and then if you say File New, I think what I actually did was I think maybe I did something like a 128 by 128 pixels like this, and that would give you a decent sized document. You know, and then let me just find an image real quick, and I'll show you what this might look like if we copy and paste something. So I'm just typing in Mario sprites, and you could probably find quite a few different things related to that. So depending on maybe what you want to go find for some type of retro image, that's going to be quite a bit different, right? I'm just going to copy this image that I see here, and then I will paste it into this document. And you can see that again, under 128 pixels, depending on what we've got that we're working with here, and I'll do Control Alt minus or plus to make this bigger or smaller like this. If I tap V to put it on the Move tool, I can move this sheet around and maybe find a particular one that I might want to convert on here. Okay, so if I put this in the corner like this and tap M for the marquee tool like this, let's see how big this actually is. So you can see that this is a width of, if I hold down Shift, I can do a square. So if this was 16 pixels by 16 pixels, not quite big enough. So if I went to the next one up, and if I went to maybe 32 pixels by 32 pixels, I could get that to fit within there. Okay, like that. And I'll just leave it there. If this is the one that I want, I'm going to go ahead and say Image, and I'll crop it like this. And I don't need the rest of this here, so I will just tap M for a marquee tool, and then I'll just drag this out. And if I want to select this as a color, I could tap I, and then do the color picker for that. And then I could fill this with the background color. You could do Alt backspace, and that fills with this one. And if you do Control backspace, it fills with this one. And I usually use the Alt and the Control that are closest to the backspace, and that helps me remember foreground, background. So I'll fill with that gray color, get rid of that. I'll hit Control D to deselect that, just like this. Okay, and if I tap V, I can do the nudge tool, and I could just nudge this thing over. I'm going to zoom in on this again, so Control Alt and plus like this. And again, I want to see where we're at with this. I'm going to do a marquee tool again, hold down Shift and see. So it would be 20 pixels that I would need for this to make this Mario, based off of what I found on the web for that. Okay, so I'll leave it up to you. You can do whatever you want with this image, but I believe we could crop in on this image, crop, and I'm just not sure how Unreal will handle these numbers. Normally you would do like 16, then 32, 64, 128, 512, 1024, 2048, 4096, and so those are the sizes that you use for your game textures. But this may not matter so much for this. So I just fill that, and what I'm going to do is just say I'm going to call this like a Mario sprite. Yeah, let me save this out. Okay, I'm going to save this, and we could save it as a target file. That would be one thing that we could do, or we can do a PNG. I'll show you if a PNG we can actually have some transparency on there. So this one is a Mario, and I think it was 20 pixels by 20. And I'll do this. Okay, I'll save it. Now that will save as a PNG file, but if I want transparency and I want to knock the background out, then I'll have to do something with that. I'll have to double click on this and release this as a layer like this. And then what I could do is just select this. I'll use the marquee tool, and if you tap M, you can do that. If I hold down Shift, I can add to that selection that we got going on here. So I'm going to try to select all the pixels that are in the background for this. Just like that. Do this. And I'm holding down the spacebar, I accidentally moved that. So we got this here. I'll just grab all this. Almost there. And I'll just hit backspace, and that will clear that out and make that on a transparent background. So I've already saved it as a PNG, but I'm going to do it again. I'm just going to hold down Control Alt and then S to do a save as, and then I'll do save on my computer. I'll change that back to the PNG, and I've already got that on there, so I'll do a Mario 20 by 20 and save that out. Okay, so I can replace that. So that's how you can get everything set up inside of Photoshop and at least get that to where you need things to be. Again, the image that I started with was a 32 pixel by 32 pixel image, and I could reduce that down to 16 by 16. Take a look at how you're reducing that thing down, and do nearest neighbor, I believe it is, to make sure you get these really crisp edges for that. So that'll give us the image that we're looking for. Okay, now that we have our sprite sheet made and we're ready to start our project, hop on over to Unreal Engine 5. I'm going to say File, New Level, just like this, and I'm actually going to make an empty level. And we will have absolutely nothing in this level, so say go ahead and create that. I'm going to go ahead and save that real quick. And we will have a completely empty space, nothing in here, and if we zoom out you might see the origin of the grid, and that's about it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I've made a folder structure like this, and it's under the content. So if we go under content, let's just take a look here. You go into content, you can right click on here and you can say new folder, and what I called this was Sprite Plane. You could name it whatever you want, but that's just what I use for that. And then within there, because we're going to do some blueprints later, made a blueprint folder, materials, meshes, and textures. And so you can right click on there and say new folder for each one of those and just generate those. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is go into the textures area and then show you the setup for this, for bringing this in. And so let's go ahead and right click on here and say import to game sprite plane textures. So let's go navigate to where our Mario file sits. Well, actually, whatever that sprite is that you're creating. And I already have this one in here already. So I'm going to do the alternate version that I just did with you all and say open for that. And I'm going to double click on this, and you're going to see it's going to look pretty darn blurry. And I'll show you why that is in just a second. So we'll double click this and open this up. So what we have going on here is this is the texture viewer, and we have a thing in games called mipmap. And basically what that does is it takes each version of the texture, and this is a pretty low res image. What might make a little bit more sense is if we started with an image that was, let's say, 128 pixels by 128 pixels. So that gets pulled into the program, and then behind the scenes it takes that one image and it generates another version that's 64 pixels by 64 pixels. So it makes it half the size of that, and then 32 by 32, and then goes down to 16 by 16, and then maybe 8 by 8. I'm not sure if it goes down even further and goes 4 by 4. So it's making and storing in one image the highest res part. It's making a bunch of smaller images that get used as it moves away from the camera. And this helps to reduce maybe anti-aliasing or sizzling in the image. If you've ever seen mip-mapping turned off in a game, you might see like it looks like a shimmering effect on 3D objects. So mip-maps help reduce this. And as you're at the very beginning stages of just getting started with things, you're probably not going to know exactly what's going on, but that's what's happening. But so this filtering effect, this blurring, is actually a good thing. But in our case, we want to work with just really hard edge pixels, so that's not really helping us out. So we're going to turn that off. So in order to turn that off, what we can do is go to this level of detail, this texture group, and we can go down to 2D pixels unfiltered, and you can see it'll say mip-map generation settings is set to no mip-maps, like that. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And if you take a look at the other version that I had on here, what I've got on that is some very similar settings, so I could just put this back on here, just like what we've got on here, this 2D unfiltered, and hit save for that. So that should do everything that we need to get the image set up from that. Now I did notice that let's just say this, the the compression settings on this, so it compresses the image, did change the colors on this a little bit. And I didn't really notice this until after I had my project going, so it did change some of the pixels, some of the coloring on the pixels on there. So if you do want to use an image without compression on there, you can use this user interface 2D RGBA for that, and that will give you better, more true color translation on there like that. So we're not doing anything like too crazy. We're just using this as kind of a guide, so I wouldn't be too worried about this. So you can set these options, and I think everything should come on over. Now if you did notice that we have red, green, and blue, and then we also have an alpha. When we saved out the PNG, when we save that out, actually has an alpha channel in there, and that's stored through the transparency, so we can see these different channels, red, green, blue, and alpha for that. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save for that. And then the next thing that we need some geometry that we're going to map this thing to. So let's hop on over to Maya real quick. Okay, so here we are inside of Maya, and we've got our mannequin that we were using from before. Here's our cube that we did the rounded corners on. And now we need to make a flat plane that we can use to store the pixel information on. So we're going to go ahead and say create polygon primitives, and then we'll do a plane. Let's do the option box so we can see the width and height for this. So the one image that I was showing you, the little small Mario, it was a 32 pixel by 32 pixel, but I was actually using half that resolution. So it was more like a 16 pixel by 16 pixel image if I made one pixel equal one of our blocks like that. So you know, 1 meter for us is 100. So if I was going to do that, then I should do 1600 by 1600 like that, and then width division I should do 16 by 16, and then have it generate with a Y up. We'll hit apply for that, and you can take a look at this, and you can see what that's going to give us. This plane that we have here, and if we counted, it should be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 across this way and 16 this way. Okay, so this could be our sprite plane. Let's just call this sprite plane, and I'll make this 16 by 16 like this. I'll copy the name because I'm going to steal that, and we can export that out. So let's take this. And it does have UVs on it automatically, which is cool. This is what we need. So you can see it's going to have UVs set up for us whenever we make this plane, so we don't have to worry about that. So basically our image is just going to get mapped flat to this plane, and that will be good for us. So let's say File, Export Selection, do the option box, FBX, and we'll export this thing out. And here is the location for this sprite plane, 16 by 16. If I save that out, we can do that right there like that, and I'll export it. I already had it saved out, so I'll just overwrite what I had before. Just going to show the channel box real quick for this. Now the other thing is that other sprite that I had was, remember, it was 20 pixels by 20 pixels. So in that case, I would have to do like this here. And let's see, so 20, let's see, I got one too many zeros, like this, and I'll do 20 by 20, okay? And I could just rename this 20 by 20. And I'm going to steal the name, copy that, and I'll export that out. Just like that. Save that out. And then now we've got something that we can work with inside of Unreal. So let's hop on over to Unreal, just like this. And what I was doing with the meshes is I had a sprite plane of 16 by 16, and if I drag that out, I've already got it set up with this image here. So if I did this, let's see here. Let me just orient myself correctly. And if I put this at the 0, 0, 0 area of the world and tap F, we could frame in on that, and you can see we've got Mario. Now I've got to make a material for this. I've already done that pre-hand, so that's why that's happening this way. So we know that this one works. I'm going to show you how to make a brand new one. And I'm going to use my second version, the 20 pixel by 20 pixel one. So I'm going to right click in here and say import, and I'm going to import my mesh in. And so if I go under what I had for the FBX for this, let me grab the sprite plane 20 by 20 that I made. Okay, so it's going to give us a new thing. If it's, you know, if you want to create a material with it, you can tell it to create new material. I've already got a material, but let's just make a new one. Let's say create new material, because I'm going to go through the same process that you would here. And if I double click on this, we can take a look at the plane, and we can go from lit to wireframe, and you can see what that looks like. I do wish the wireframe visibility in here was like a little bit easier to see, but yeah, so there's your wireframe that you got. I'm going to go ahead and save that, and then I will throw this into the world, and I'll zero this out. So on X, Y, Z, I will zero that out like this. And so this is the piece of geometry. This is a temp material, and we could call this, let me see what I called the other one. So I called this M_ Mario Sprite Plane. And what I could do is just copy the name from this and show you this here. I'm going to paste it and do an _v2 for version 2 like this. And then I will take you through the options of how to set this up. It's pretty simple. We can double click on this. It's already got a parameter on here for the base color, but that's going to, if we double click that lets us choose like a different color like this way for it. So that's actually pretty nice, but not what we need. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. And then let's go navigate to the area where we import the textures in. So I go to texture, and here's my new sprite. I can drag that in just like this, and then I can take the RGB out from that and plug it into the base color, just like this. And if I want to see what this looks like, they've got a cylinder, they've got a sphere that you can take a look at. They also have a plane that you can take a look at as well. Now, if you remember, whenever we imported this thing in, it had transparency. And in Unreal, there's two different types of transparency. If we take a look at the blending mode on here, if we just click off anywhere like this, say we've got this selected, or if we have this selected, this is really what you probably want. You can actually select this, but if you don't have this selected and it's somewhere off the screen, you can always just click on the open viewport in here, and this will get you to this part over here under details. So the blending mode right now is set to opaque, and that's probably what's going to be good in most cases. If we change this to masked, this is the two different transparency types. If we do masked, it's going to do a transparency type of turning black and white pixel data into either being on transparency or off transparency. So it's either going to be opaque or not opaque. And that's the cheapest version. It sorts correctly, and that's what we want. Now, translucent would be full gradation, full gradients, full transparency. So something like if you're going to do something like hair strands and stuff like that, eyelashes, things that have varying degrees of transparency. So say it's like more opaque at the root, and as it gets towards the tip of it, it goes more transparent. Then you want this full gradation translucency. It would look better, but it has problem sorting and things like that. So we're just going to use this simple version, this masked. And you can see that as soon as we change that from that blending mode, it opens up this slot, opacity masked. Now if we did translucent, it would open up opacity, but we're not doing that. So now we can take the alpha out of that and plug it into the opacity masked area like this. And you can see it's going to knock that out for us and make this nice looking card sprite thing. So let's go ahead and save that. Okay, and what we're going to do is assign this material to our plane. So go ahead and go to the meshes area and go to our 20 by 20 slot on here, and we do already have that material has already been assigned to it just because we imported it in and we changed that out. So we should be good to go. I'm going to go ahead and save that. Now I do want you to remember, if you want to be organized with things, we got a material sitting here, and we can click and drag that into our materials folder. And we can just say move here. So now all of our materials are being organized, and I've got two different materials. And then this is sitting right here in the world, just like this. And we can see everything nice and easy because it's unlit. If we do unlit, we can see this. So let's just go to lit. It goes away. Let me show you what we can do for that. So there's no lighting information in here. We can add a light to it, to the scene, and we will do that. But the other thing that we can do is go to the material type, and instead of running to base color, what we could actually do is pipe this out and push it into emissive color. And the difference between base color and emissive color is emissive doesn't need any lighting information to be lit. So if you put your object in a completely unlit room with no lights, it's still going to act almost as if it's like a light source. Okay, that could come in handy for glows and like things that are like you're doing this visual trick for lights and things like that. Now in the old Unreal, that was a problem because it wasn't an actual light source, and it would look like it's lit, but then you would have to put like a an actual light in there to make it light up the meshes and things like that around it. With the new Lumen system, emissive actually acts as light, which is pretty darn cool. To unplug this, we'll hold down Alt and we click on that. I'll go ahead and hit save for that. And then let's take a look at what this looks like inside the world now. Okay, all right, go ahead and close that down, and you can see if we're lit, and even if we're unlit, then this is what things still look like for us on there. So I'm going to go to lit, back on here, and then let's go to our meshes folder. And what we should have from the earlier section is our different cubes that we have. So we should have our 1 meter by 1 meter cube with our rounded corners. And I'm just going to click and I'm going to drag that in here, and I'm going to go to 0, 0, 0 with this and see where we sit. And then I'm going to go and make my first cube, and it could be anywhere on this plane. You can see I've got grid snapping set to actually 50 units. That just makes it pretty easy to move around after we've got that first cube set up. If we need to do like a half step in between, once it's set up, then you could actually put this on 100, and you can see now whenever I move that, it's just going to move one unit over like that. Okay. All right, so the next thing that I'm going to need to do is set up a parent material for things. So if you take a look under materials, I've got a bunch of different materials that I've made that have the different colors that were represented in this sprite. But first I made a parent material, and what I can explain about a parent material is anything you set up in the parent, if you make children from that and you change the parent, the children inherit all the values, and they inherit everything that's going on from the parent. What is really cool is each child can take the things from the parent and then they can start to alter them. So that's where all these color differences are coming into play with the children on here. So the parent is just pretty boring, just a gray material. So if I double click on this, you can see what was made for that. So you already know if we import in, you can have it create a material for you, Or if you want to create a material at any point, you can always right click. I'm in the materials folder, and we can say new material, just like this. Okay, and it'll make a new blank material. Usually call this underscore m underscore, and then just call this like default material, like that. Okay, and if I double click on this and then open this up, you can see what we've got. It's pretty darn simple. There's not much to it. You saw when we created a material, it makes something like this, but it had something for base color already in there. It had a parameter. So what's kind of cool is if you make a parameter for these different values, if you make a material instance, it will just give you those things that you can tune. So let's just say I wanted to tune metallic or specular or roughness or any of these values, we can make a parameter for it. So I'm going to show you how to do this real quick. It's so easy. Just right click over the base color and say promote to parameter, and you can see it makes a parameter node for that thing, and it gives it its name that you have here. So if we do right click on here and say promote to parameter, I've got metallic. Right click on here and say promote to parameter, specular. Now you do have to watch what's going on with this. So when we start off a normal material, you do want a value of 0 for metallic. Most materials are not metallic. They're either metallic or not. And if it is metallic, then it would be a default value of 1. We can change this stuff later, and I'll show you that with the material instance. And for the base color, you would think, let's see, double click on that, and if we give it a value of 0.2, that's actually like a mid-gray. That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but that's just, will give you what you're looking for here. Okay, so you can see there's not much specularity going on this, because when we made a parameter, it gave a value of 0. So that's basically killing all of our specularity that's going on here for this. So let's click on it, default value, and I'll make this 1. So now you can see we got specularity on there. If we hold down L and then click and then drag, we can change the lighting direction of this, just like that, and we can get a better look of what's going on for this. Okay, so watch this already. We can already start to play around with the default value of metallic. If we make it 1, you can see how it changes this. Now if you do make something metallic, obviously it makes it more reflective and shiny and everything else like that, but it does take whatever is going on in the base color, and it kind of makes it more contrasty, or kind of makes it a little bit darker. So just be aware of that. So I'll put this back down to 0. Now we can right click on roughness, promote to parameter, and on here, roughness value of 0 is going to give you something that looks like glass. Now if you combine that together with metal, look what you get. Basically like this chrome looking reflection. So if you want something like that, you can play around with that. I'll put this back down to 0, and then roughness, what I usually like is about 0.3, somewhere around in there. And I think that gives a nice specular component to it. It is a little bit reflective. Now if you take a look at this value, if you click and drag, so if we make this 1, that means it's got full roughness. And you can see what it does. It kills all the specularity and it kills all the reflectivity, because the surface is very, very rough. You can think of it that way, right? Now if I don't want it to be rough at all, like glass, then that's 0. And then these different values that you've got in between. So there's 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6. So you can see how it steps through that. And like I was saying, I like 0.3, somewhere around there. You could even do 0.35, something like that. That's a pretty good value. So we can also right click on emissive color and promote that to a parameter. And you can see here, if we have no emissive and it's black, not going to make things look like it's self-glowing or anything else like that. But if we double click on this, and let's say we make this full red, you can see what's starting to happen here on this. Now the interesting thing is with emissives is you can actually overdrive the value. So let's put this at like 10, and it starts to really glow. Okay, let's put it at 50 and 200. Let's do 2,000. Let's do 10,000. Yeah. So you can see how that value really changes, and you can see with lumen over the time, it just feels like I don't know, plasma ball or something like that. I don't know what you want to call that. So even a value of 20. So you'll have to just play around with this and see what values work for you. Okay, I'm going to put this back down to black like this and go ahead and save it. Now, this material is not very complicated, and the more complicated the material is, then you're going to see that it starts to slow down in here, and it takes a while to tune these values. Okay, so once this is set up with these parameters like this, you can actually make a material instance, and you can tune this stuff live in the viewer. So that's a pretty powerful thing. Let's take a look at that. Okay, so I'm going to close this down. So we've got our material default that we just made, and if we assign it to our cube, not much is going on, right? Same thing like what we see in here. We are only getting lighting coming from this image down here because of lumen, because we made this emissive color, which is actually pretty cool. But I'm not going to do too much with this until we do the material instance. Let's make a material instance. Let's right click on here and say create material instance, like that. Okay, and so we've got this M default material, and it'll put an instance like this back here, and I can assign this to this cube, and it's going to have all the same options we had before. But now if we double click on it, you can see what happens with this. If I scale this down a little bit, we've got everything that we made before is exposed, and we can click on this and start changing the values of this. So we had this base color, right? So if we wanted to change the color of it, we can go in through here, and now we can make this red, just like that. Pretty simple. If we want to come through, you want to make it blue, you can change the hue, and you can see that's what I was telling you. It's like very, very fast, and you can see this updating in the world, right? So we can just again cycle through some of this, and let's say we make a orange or yellow, something like that. Okay, so with metallic, same thing. We can click and drag, and we can interactively change the values on this. And I know I can only push that to 1. You can overdrive these values, but you probably don't want to do that. Now if I've got metallic all the way up, and then I can take the roughness down to 0, I can make that super shiny like this and through here. And then if I want to kill the specularity, might be possible. I don't know if I've got to, I do have to take metallic off. I did notice that if metallic is on, this specular override thing does not work. Okay. Now if metallic is set to 0, I can play around with this specularity, and it goes again from 1, and if I start to drag this down towards 0, it's basically killing the specularity that's on it. So just something to keep in mind. And again, with the roughness, you can put it on something I like, maybe 0.3, 0.35, something like that, just like that. Okay. Now what I did notice about this, if I wanted to change this color, and I wanted this color of this object to be the same thing as my sprite, what I can go to do is go to the texture. I can double click this, and I can have this like here. Let me put this off to the side, and I can click this, and to pick colors, you can take the color picker and you can go and find that shade that you have within through there, like that. Okay, and I'll hit save for this, and let me go ahead and close that down for now. So I do have this model here. If I go to unlit, I can see that that color should match within through there. Now to move a block over, I can hold down Alt, and then I can click, and I can drag out copies of this, just like this. And I know that's showing up as a different color, but again, if we went to this sprite here, it is just a little bit different. So if I want to capture that, basically I'm going to need a material instance for this one here, the different reds, all these different shades. I would need to make a material instance for each one of those. So depending on the complexity of your sprite, that will matter. I'm just going to drag this out for demonstration purposes. So I'm holding on Alt and then clicking and dragging. this. And what I would like to do, I'll make another one, and I'll show you this. So we can go to our materials, and how I made duplicates of this. I'll just save this one real quick. And you can actually right click and you can actually duplicate your material instance. So I was giving this a name, so let's just call this Mario 2, and let's see, dark black, and I still have the instance on the name back there. So if I double click that, what I was hoping for is if I could actually use the color picker and then pick within here, it will allow you to do that, but I noticed that there was some kind of slight difference that was going on in what was actually happening here. So that's why I was color picking off of this thing instead. So I'd have to figure out and find out like why that color difference is happening. But if I picked from here, hit OK, and save that, things were matching up closer. And you can see there is, I don't know if it has something to do with Lumen and possibly Lumen driving maybe some of the values and things like that that's happening inside the engine, and if that's why that's happening. But this should give you everything that you need. So I'm going to just finish just this part out, and then I will show you how to set up some lighting information. So I'll push this up here, and then this up here like this, and I'll put it back to lit. And you can see everything is going to be very dark because we only have light coming from down here. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is add a light source. So you can see this place actors, and if you don't see that, you can find that over here and say place actors. You should be able to get this here. They do have a whole lighting area, and we do have spotlights, which are pretty cool, and that'll give you a circular, think about it like in the circus, and they're focusing a light over the top of the subject in the middle of the stage, and they got fall off to black. That'll give you a spotlight. Point light is going to be a single point of light, like a light bulb, and then it'll radiate from all different directions. Directional light is something that you would use for outside, but they do have this rectangle light, which is really nice. So if I drag this in, I'm going to put this at 0, 0, 0, like this. I'll go ahead and raise this thing up, just like this, and we can push this here. You can see the direction of it if we zoom in on it. If we tap spacebar to get the rotation, we can rotate that thing down like this, so -90, just like that. And so with the rectangle light, you've got the source width like this, and so maybe I can do 2000 for that, and then a source height. We can do that too. So you can make it like a fluorescent light that you might see up in the ceiling, or if you want to make it a big giant square, that's really up to you, whichever you want to do. Barn door length, so maybe I'll do something like that. And then there's a barn door angle, and so there's a lot of really nice options for this here. Now they do have attenuation radius, and that is how far out into the world the light goes and the light travels. So if I put that number up pretty high, maybe I'll do 20,000, like that. It should travel out to the distance that we need, and then we can actually change the intensity of this. So let's do a little bit higher, maybe 30, something like that. And you can see we're starting to get a pretty decent amount of light that sits on there like that. Okay, so that's going to give us everything that we need for our lighting setup, and then give us everything that we need for making our materials. Let's go back to the materials and just take a look real quick again. So to create all these different materials that I have, this was the process that I used to set everything up. I made one parent material, made the parameters for that, duplicated. After I made a material instance, I duplicated that multiple times for things, and then just basically changed the color value on each one of those. So if I double click one of these material instances, you can see that we've got this base color is opened up, and the base color on this is opened up. Now I didn't check these things for metallic, roughness, or specular. I let that all come from the parent material. Now if you click these on, each material instance will override the parent. But if these things are off, take a look at what happens at this time. Let me save this file real quick. So here's the original file that I had, and I wanted to show you with this parent material that I have on here. I could go through here, and after everything's set up, I could go to the metallic and I could change that to 1, and you can see it's going to change it for all the instances of this. So that's what I was saying, that's the power of having a parent material, and it actually drives everything, right? And if we wanted to take like our roughness and we wanted to pull this down and say 0.1 for everything, you can see we've got everything as a whole lot more shinier and everything like that, right? That's, again, a little bit of the power of being able to do this. What I ended up creating for this, and you can see this on here, everything's the same like with that setup that I just showed you. Created material instances for each one of those and assigned those to each one of these cubes and then laid that out. Now I did make some gray cubes that you see back here like this, and then push them down so they go down just a little bit, like 1 cube length down and through here like that. And organization for this stuff, so you can grab a bunch of meshes and you can make a group for things, and then you can show or hide them. This doesn't work in game, but it does work for organization within your scene. So you can see I put all the background tiles on there, the sprite plane, and then this. So let me hide all that. If I show you the sprite plane, that's what we started off with, and then from there I laid out the different cubes that we have, just like that. Let me turn the visibility of that on. And yeah, so the body and then these background tiles like this. So if I hide that sprite plane, you can see what we've got going on there. And then we got the Mario body together. Now if I turn that sprite plane on, it does have some emissive qualities to it, so that's why you see this little bit of glow that you got going on through there. Now I do have a rectangle light on here. I did put this exponential height fog on here, which I don't think I really did too much with that. That does give a pretty nice effect, I guess, for fog, and that exists within the visual effects here. So you can do an exponential height fog, and if you drag that in, if I put that set 0, 0, 0 for that, if I put the fog density up to 10 and did this, let's see if we can actually see this. And I think I accidentally turned the visibility of this off. Yep. So there we go. So you can hide things within the engine this way by turning things on and off like that, but that is only in the viewer. So if you go to play the game, it's not on there like that. So you could have to go to rendering and turn off the visibility. So if you want to hide something in the game, still have it available, that is a way to do that, but I got myself confused on that. So fog density of 10 is pretty darn high, right? And if you do a fall off of 2, you can see that it kind of pushes the fog down in the world a little bit. Now if you took this and made this negative 1000 like that, you can see it pushes the fog plane down even further. And so think of fog as like a gradient from the floor up. And so what we've done is we've taken that gradient and we've kind of pushed it down in the world a bit more. So that's why we're seeing that. Now if we do negative 2000, you can see we can get even less. Now they do have this fog cutoff distance, and if we made that high enough, you really wouldn't see it in the background too much. Let's see if I did 200, 100. Let's go 0 for that. That just pushes it off into infinity down within through here. Now again, if I raise this up like this, we can also take the fog density and put this down to maybe 1 or something like that. I didn't really like it showing through that, so that's what I was trying to play around with this this thing here. So if we get this to go far enough back, there is a little bit happening with the fog, but just not too much on through there. And you can see this would give you this overlay over the top of it. I do think that looks a bit weird. Now you can change this start distance, and you can get this, see if you get that just right, you could get it to where it looks like there's not very much fog through here. So as we drive through the world, it's more foggy, and if we get closer to the object, less fog on through there. So you could play around with that if you wanted to. I was not really liking the visibility of that, so that's why that was in there. And again, if you want to keep it in there and not have it show up, you can go to rendering and turn off the visibility of that, just like that. The other thing that I did with this scene that's maybe a little bit different is there is a player start in here. And if we go to this place actor and do, if you want to find any of these things and you know what they're called, you can find the player start, click and drag it within through there, like that. And I think I just raised it up, the actual player start, and then hit end, and it would go on top of the bricks here. Now if we change this, I was on simulate, I'm going to put this in selected viewport, and this will let me play and then run around, and then you can see what I've got going on here is I'm able to run around on this sprite plane that I've created. And so I've turned Mario sprites into a little level that I can move around and jump in and everything like that. Okay. One last thing. So if you saw that I went into the game and I was able to play using the male character, if we go to the blueprints and we go to BP third person character, if you double click on that and open that up, if we go to the viewport, you can see I've got the male character. So there is a mesh character that you can plug in here, and I think they have the female character in there. So if you wanted to use the male character, it is possible that you could do that. So you would have to go to characters and go to mannequins, go to meshes, and find the male version, SK Manny, and then you could plug it into this area. So depending on if you want to play with the male or the female model, it's up to you what you want to play with. So I just swapped that back out for the female model, and you can see we can use that one. And if I want to go back to this third person blueprints, double click on that and go to the mesh component, and then we can go to the meshes here, go to the mannequin, save that, compile it, save it, and then play. We've got this to run around in just like that. Okay. And the last thing, if I tap G, if I go out of here, again, I made my own hotkeys. You hit Control 1, 2, 3, 4 like that, so we can set up some different hotkeys. But with Lumen turned on, you can get a really high quality look pretty easily by just adding just a little bit of lighting information, and it's doing global illumination, and it's taking the color of this red and then kicking it up against the green and everything else like that, and it's taking our glow value that we had from the emissive color from the sprite plane, and it's illuminating things. Now this is called Z fighting. Those things sit directly over the top of each other. Those polygons are sharing the same space, so it is fighting with that a little bit. And then the one last thing that I didn't really tell you about the material for the sprite plane thing is this, making a material that is double-sided. So if I go to my materials and we take a look at this, I don't think I turned it on for this new one, this example that we did. So if I put that on a plane and we looked on the underside, it would be completely transparent because it's only one-sided. If we want to see it on both sides, the top and the bottom, we turn it on this two-sided. Give it a second, go ahead and save it, and then now you've made your material double-sided like that. So that should give you everything that you need to go ahead and get this part of the project done. and you can have some fun with that and make your own retro 2D type sprint thing that are sprites that are made out of actual 3D geometry.